The news, a local representative trying to fight domestic violence across the state through legislation that he just filed. Representative Abel Herrero, a Democrat from Robstown, says that he hopes it will empower and encourage survivors to escape the cycle of violence. HB 1661 would allow district attorneys to file continuous family violence charges if the offense or offenses take place in several counties. HB 1660 would train officers on how best to recognize early signs to prevent further abuse. And HB 1662 would give counties more funds to expand GPS monitoring. Finally, HB 1663 would provide more ways to terminate leases to remove ties to abusers. If you'd like to learn more about these laws, these proposals, go to our website, KIIITV.com.